Hello friends, very warm welcome to my business laws channel. Friends, in the last lecture class, I started second unit, which was Sale of Goods Act 1930. So till now, I have covered the very first chapter, which was nature and formation of contract of sale. So today I'm going to take up second chapter under the Sale of Goods Act, which is chapter number 15. So the title is Conditions and Warranties. So let us know now, friends, what is the meaning of condition and warranties. What is a condition and what is a warranty? Friends, you all know there are certain statements which are made by the seller before the buyer. Some statements are very significant. They form the very basis of contract. And breach of these, gives the right to the buyer to put an end to the contract. On the other hand, there are certain statements which do not form the very basis of contract. They are not very important, significant. They are incidental to the main purpose of contract. So those statements are known as warranties. And the statements which are very important ones, which form the basis of contract, they are known as conditions. Now, one of the renowned authors, M.C. Kuchal, has given in his book, they are the major terms. Conditions are the major terms, and the warranties are the minor terms. So let me proceed further, friends. So condition has been defined under section 12, subsection 2 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. What is a condition? Let us know now what is a condition, what is a warranty, and these two terms I would like to clarify with the help of examples. Condition, as per section 12, subsection 2, a condition is a stipulation essential to the main purpose of the contract, the breach of which gives a right to the buyer to put an end to the contract or to treat the contract as repudiated. So friends, it is very clear from the definition which is given under section 12, subsection 2, that this stipulation forms the basis of contract. It is very significant. It is essential to the main purpose of contract. So the breach of this gives the right to the buyer to put an end to the contract. Now, what is warranty? Now, warranty is a minor term. Warranty is a stipulation as per section 12, subsection 3. It is a stipulation collateral to the main purpose of the contract, the breach of which gives rise to claim for damages. But it does not provide the right to the buyer to reject the goods and to terminate the contract. So buyer has no right to put an end to the contract. So let me give you example to clarify both the concepts, condition and warranty. See, the buyer is very particular about buying imported watches. Now he goes to the seller, he says, I want to buy Swiss made watch. And seller supplies him the watch saying that this is Swiss made watch. So buyer believes the seller and he buys that watch. But later on it turns out that watch is not Swiss made watch. It is Indian watch. Then the buyer has the right to put an end to the contract. Putting an end to the contract means he can return that watch to the seller and get back his price. But when we talk about warranty, buyer says, I want good watch. He's not very particular about imported items. Seller tells him that, look, this is good watch and this is Swiss made watch. Here the buyer believes the seller and he buys that watch. But then again, he consults his friends and they tell him this is not Swiss made watch. So friends, second example is different from the first example. In the second example, the buyer was not very particular about imported items. He wanted good watch. So in the second case, when he found the watch was not Swiss made watch, so there was a breach of warranty on the part of seller. And you all know the breach of warranty on the part of seller, it provides the right to the buyer to recover damages only. So he can only recover damages. He paid the price for Swiss watch, but the watch was Indian. Then whatever is the difference between the two prices, he will have the right to recover that price from the seller. So right to recover damages, warranty does not provide, the right to the buyer to put an end to the contract. What right he has? He has a right to recover or to claim damages only. I hope, friends, you must have understood these two concepts. First was condition and second was warranty. Now I take up the heading condition versus warranty. How is the condition different from warranty? All time, friends, whenever any distinction is asked, you should always write the distinction in the T form. The table is before you. 4 points of distinction are there. Nature. Condition is of fundamental nature, very significant, and warranty is of a subsidiary of inferior character. It is not as significant as the condition is. Condition is essential to the main purpose of contract. It is given in the definition itself, but warranty is only collateral to the main purpose of the contract. Now, breach of condition gives the right to the aggrieved party to put an end to the contract, to terminate the contract. But breach of warranty gives the right to the aggrieved party to claim damages only. It was very clear from the example which I have given you. Then treatment is the last point of distinction. Now, a breach of condition may be taken as a breach of warranty, but breach of warranty can never be taken as a breach of condition. So, continuing with the same example which I have given you, Swiss made watch. Now, in the first case, when the buyer was very particular about buying Swiss made watch, and a Swiss made watch was given to him by the seller saying that this is Swiss made watch, but watch was Indian watch, then buyer has a right to put an end to the contract because there was a breach of condition. But buyer doesn't want to put an end to the contract. He wants to treat this breach of condition as a breach of warranty. What he wants to do? He wants to recover damages only. But in the second case, friends, when there was a breach of warranty on the part of seller, then buyer will have no right to put an end to the contract. So breach of condition may be taken as a breach of warranty, but breach of warranty can never be taken as a breach of condition. This is all about the distinction between condition and warranty. Now I would like to move further. Now, when is the breach of condition treated as a breach of warranty? So there are 2 points here. One is voluntary waiver, and second is, friends, acceptance of goods by the buyer. Voluntary waiver. Waiver means to give up. Buyer has the right to put an end to the contract, but he has given up his right. He doesn't want to put an end to the contract. Again, Swiss watch example. Buyer has waived his right. Which right? To terminate the contract. He wants to treat the breach of condition as a breach of warranty on voluntary basis. Nobody is forcing him. It is his own option. He wants to treat the breach of condition as a breach of warranty. And the second case, when the breach of condition can be taken as a breach of warranty, is acceptance of goods by the buyer. Friends, one of the classifications of contract is contract may be entire or divisible. Entire is also known as non-divisible. So contract is non-divisible, but buyer has accepted some goods or part thereof. Then he cannot treat the breach of condition as a breach of warranty. If he has accepted part thereof, then the remaining goods also will have to be accepted by him. He cannot do like this, that he wants to treat the breach of condition as a breach of warranty in those cases where the contract is entire. Then for remaining goods, you'll be forced to accept the contract. So these are the two cases when breach of condition can be taken as a breach of warranty. And now, friends, there is a very important heading which is condition and express and implied conditions and warranties in the contract of sale. Now, when we talk about conditions and warranties, they may be express or implied. Express may be verbal or written, but implied is always implied from the circumstances or behavior of the parties. Implied conditions and warranties are those which are automatically incorporated by the law in the contract, and they have been provided under sections 14 to 17 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. And now friends, I'll take up all these 7 implied conditions one by one with the help of examples and case laws. First one is condition as to title. Now under the contract, it is always, it is not written, it is always implied. Anybody who is selling the goods has the right to sell the goods. If his title later on turns out to be defective, then the buyer will have the right to put an end to the contract and get back his price. There's a very important case law regarding this. Case is before you, which is Roland versus Diwal. A motorbike was taken by the buyer from the seller. He used this motorbike for 2-3 months, and then real owner came to the buyer. He said that this is my motorbike, and buyer had to return the motorbike to the true owner. So whatever price was paid by the buyer to the seller, it was held in the court of law. Buyer was having the right to recover his price from the seller because motorbike was stolen one. And now the second one is sale by description. Now goods should always be supplied by the seller to the buyer, which should always correspond with the description. If they differ from the description, then buyer is not bound to accept the goods. If buyer has given the order for peas, he should not be supplied with beans. If he is, he has the right to put an end to the contract. Now this condition is applicable if buyer has not seen the goods and relies upon the description given by the seller. Where the buyer has seen the goods, but he relies on what the seller has told him. He is totally dependent upon the seller's judgment. He is not going to exercise his own judgment. See, he has to visit hilly area, and he tells the seller, "Look, suggest me the car which will suit my purpose." And the seller suggests him the car, the same car he buys, and then he finds the car is not fit for his purpose. Then of course this condition will apply. There will be breach of condition by description, and buyer will have the right to recover the loss from the seller and return that item to the seller. And now sale by sample is the third implied condition. Now wherever the goods are sold by sample, then there is implied condition that goods must correspond with the sample in quality. So in case of tobacco, the goods are sold by a sample. And there is condition, friends, that buyer shall have the right to compare the goods with the sample. And if he finds there is a deviation, there will be a breach of implied condition as to sample. He will have the right to return that item to the seller and get back his price. And goods should also be merchantable goods. It should not be unmerchantable goods. Now next is sale by sample as well as description. Sometimes the goods are sold as per sample as well as description. Some sample is shown by the seller to the buyer, and description is also given by the seller to the buyer. Then there is implied condition in the contract of sale that goods should always correspond with the sample as well as description. If they correspond with the sample, but they do not correspond with the description, wrong description is given by the seller, then also the buyer will have the right to put an end to the contract. Next is implied condition as to quality or fitness. The rule of CAVEAT EMPTOR, let the buyer beware. It is a duty of the buyer. He must see to it that goods which are bought by him, they are fit for his purpose. So they should be suitable for his purpose, but this implied condition as to quality or fitness is applicable in the following cases. When the goods are sold for a particular purpose, single purpose only, then the goods must be fit for the purpose. Where the goods purpose is made known by implication, then also it is clear from the example itself, the case law of priest versus last, where the hot bottle was taken by the buyer. Hot water bottle, should bear the hot water. When bottle was used by the buyer, he was inserting hot water into the bottle, and bottle bursted and it injured the eyes of the buyer. So it was held in the court of law that it has got single purpose only. If the goods are used for single purpose only, then the purpose should be served. If it is not served, buyer will have the right to recover price from the seller. If the goods are used for multiple purposes, then it is a duty of the buyer. Buyer must disclose the purpose to the seller. Then only this condition will be applicable. Next is, there are certain exceptions, where this condition is not applicable. That goods, will not be fit for the purpose. First is where the goods can be used for several purposes. There's a case law regarding this, which is Johns versus Puckett. Here, cloth was purchased by the buyer from the seller, but purpose was not disclosed. That he is going to use this cloth for making uniforms. But there were certain defects in the cloth, and the buyer purpose could not be served. And he wanted to terminate the contract. It was held in the court of law that buyer had no right to terminate the contract because purpose was not disclosed by the buyer to the seller. Though that cloth which was bought by the buyer, it was not fit for making uniforms, but it was, a fit for some other purpose. So purpose must be disclosed where the item can be used for several purposes. Where the goods are sold under patent or trade name, then also there is no implied condition as to quality or fitness. Where the buyer is suffering from abnormality, he has got certain problem. Okay, then he must disclose it to the seller. Otherwise, how the seller will come to know? So there is a case law, Griffiths versus Peter Conway Limited. Lady was suffering from abnormal skin. She was having abnormal skin, sensitive skin, but she did not disclose this fact to the seller. She wanted to buy tweed coat, and tweed coat is meant for normal skin. And when she used this tweed coat, she had rashes all over her body. And now she wanted to return this coat to the seller and wanted to get back the price. It was held in the court of law. Since lady was suffering from abnormality, she should have disclosed this fact to the seller. And she did not. Tweed coat is meant for normal skin only. So there was no implied condition as to quality or fitness in this case. Condition as to merchantability. Goods must be of merchantable quality. And if they are not of merchantable quality, then in that case, the buyer will have the right to put an end to the contract. Leading case law is before you, which is Johns versus Just. Here, friends, in this case, Johns versus Just, Manila hemp was purchased. Bales of Manila hemp that was purchased by the buyer from the seller, and it was to arrive from Singapore. And hemp was damaged by seawater. It could not be sold as Manila hemp. So it was held in the court of law that buyer was entitled to recover damages as the goods were not of merchantable quality. So this is all about this 6th point. Now coming to the next point, which is conditions as to wholesomeness. So this condition is applicable in case of eatables and provisions. They must be pure ones. They should not be harmful for human consumption. If the items which are bought by the buyer from the seller, they are harmful for human consumption. The buyer consumes and gets, certain reaction. Whatever loss he suffers, goes to the doctor, gets a medical treatment. So all amount he can recover from the seller. There is a case law, Frost versus Ellsbury Dairy. Now in this case, what happened, milk was purchased by the buyer from the seller. Milk contained typhoid germs. And wife of the seller, consumed that milk, and she, got infection and she died of typhoid germs. and it was held in the court of law that buyer was entitled to recover all damages, going to the doctor, getting the treatment from the seller. So this is all about the implied conditions. And now friends, I'll take up the heading implied warranties. Now you all understand, I hope, that the meaning of implied warranties, which I have clarified with the help of example. So there are certain implied warranties in the context of sale. First is implied warranty of quiet possession. Now, every buyer has the right to keep the peaceful possession of the goods. If his possession is disturbed, then he will have the right to, recover his price from the seller. There is an overlapping of this, friends. The case is before you, Mason versus Birmingham. In this case, motorbike was purchased for 30,000 rupees by the buyer from the seller. Now, buyer used it. He also incurred some expenses on the repair of the motorbike. Then after using it for a few months, seller came to him. The true owner came to him and said, I'm the owner of this motorbike. And buyer had to return the motorbike to the true owner. There is overlapping. The same point we have said it in case of implied condition as to title also. So buyer's possession should not be disturbed. Next one is implied warranty as to free from liability or encumbrance. Any item which is bought by the buyer from the seller, it should not be subject to liability. It should not be subject to pledge or mortgage, or any liability should not have been created on that. And if it is created, the buyer comes to know that certain loan was taken on the basis of on this item, and very smartly the seller obtained the possession of goods from the pledgee and sold the goods to the buyer. And buyer comes to know through the pledgee person. Then of course, friends, and the liability is discharged by the buyer, then buyer will have the right to recover this amount from the seller. So item must be free from liability or encumbrance. Implied warranty as to quality or fitness by the usage of trade. So this can be annexed by the usage of trade or by the custom of trade. Then implied warranty as to disclose the dangerous nature of goods. If goods are dangerous in character, then dangerous nature of the goods must be disclosed by the seller to the buyer. Otherwise, how will the buyer come to know that goods are dangerous in character and certain precautions are to be taken by the buyer? Disinfectant powder. Friends, it is always written on the label of the bottle that whenever you open it, you protect this from your eyes. Be very careful while opening the bottle. And if item is dangerous in character, no precautions are there, and buyer doesn't know that he has to take certain precautions, he uses the item and he gets injuries, then of course, friends, whatever loss is suffered by the buyer, he will have the right to recover this loss from the seller. So this is all about express and implied conditions and warranties. Now the last heading, friends, I'm going to take up, which is doctrine of CAVEAT EMPTOR, which means let the buyer beware. Now this doctrine of CAVEAT EMPTOR is made up of two words. One is caution and second is, one is caveat and second is emptor. Caveat is caution and emptor is buyer. Let the buyer beware. Buyer must be very careful while buying the item, and if he is not, that in that case he cannot hold the seller responsible for the loss. So there are certain cases, friends, where this rule applies. So where the buyer has examined the goods and such examination would have disclosed those defects. It is a duty of the buyer. He must examine the goods. If he does not examine the goods, then in that case he cannot hold the seller responsible for the loss. He will have to bear the loss himself. Where the goods are sold under patent name or trade name, and buyer does not rely on the seller's skill and judgment. So he uses his own skill and judgment. Then also, friends, he will not have the right to make the seller responsible for the loss. See, I have given you example during this video lecture class that he has to visit hilly area. He takes his own decision that say Wagoner car will suit his purpose. He takes the Wagoner car depending upon his own judgment, and then he finds item is not fit for his purpose. He will not have the right to put an end to the contract. Where the seller is not the exclusive dealer of goods, then also this caveat emptor rule applies. But there are some exceptional cases where this rule is not applicable. That is, buyer will not bear the loss, but buyer will have the right to hold the seller responsible for the loss. So now I'll take up all these exceptions. First one is goods purchased by description. Second is goods purchased by sample and description. Third is goods of merchantable quality. Fourth is wholesomeness of goods. Usage of goods. Then consent obtained by fraud. Friends, all these exceptions have been provided under Section 16 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. They are not new points. You already know, friends. I have discussed under the heading implied conditions or implied warranties. You all know, friends. Implied condition as to title, description, sample and description, merchantability, quality or fitness, or apart from this, wholesomeness. In all these conditions, I have taught you. The implied conditions are there, and if the goods are sold by the seller to the buyer, they do not correspond with the description, then in that case, buyer will have the right to hold seller responsible for the loss. He will have the right to put an end to the goods must be fit for the purpose. If the buyer has disclosed the purpose to the seller, if item can be used for multiple purposes and purpose has been disclosed by the buyer to the seller, then of course, friends, the rule of caveat emptor will not apply. Buyer suffers loss, he will have the right to recover this loss from the seller. Consent is obtained by fraud. Buyer has done his job. He has examined the item while buying, but defect was latent defect. It was not visible on the ordinary examination. Buyer has examined, he checked, he was satisfied, he bought the item, but later on the defect became visible. Then in this case, friends, there was latent defect. It means the seller has tried to deceive the buyer. Here the buyer will have the right to hold the seller responsible for the loss, meaning thereby the rule of caveat emptor will not apply. So friends, doctrine of caveat emptor. What is it? This word is made up of two words. It combines two words. One is caveat and second is emptor. And I have explained the meaning of both the words and which are the cases where this doctrine applies, and there are certain exceptional cases where this rule of caveat emptor is not applicable. And these points have been provided under Section 16 of the Sale of Goods Act 1930. So it is all about today's class, friends. What I have covered in my today's lecture class. First of all, I did introduce two terms. One was condition and second was warranty. How is condition different from warranty? When can the breach of condition be taken as a breach of warranty? Then I talked about implied conditions, then implied warranties, and then which are the various implied conditions and warranties in the contract of sale. And lastly, I took up the heading which was caveat emptor. So friends, it is all from my side. I hope you will like the content. Do like my videos, do subscribe to my channel, do press on the bell icon so that you can get notifications of my future videos. Keep smiling always and stay blessed always. Okay friends, goodbye. We'll meet soon.